Hello YouTube, my name is Paul. I hope you're keeping well. Welcome back to another Ocean Software video. I'll talk about 10 games that weren't released by Ocean Software for the Commodore 64 for whatever reason. Now, I've recently discovered a site called Games That Weren't, and on that site there are hundreds if not thousands of titles for the Commodore 64 that were either original builds that were never eventually released, games that were destined for the old Commodore 64 GS and didn't materialise, or games that were finished but Ocean Software lost interest, or there was legal wranglings. So I've picked 10 games, so the first 10 I've got to go through. You can play some of them you can just see rolling demos, and some will be quite a surprise, because I was quite surprised to see some of these games in this list. And it kind of answered a couple of questions I had in a previous Amiga video as to why those games weren't released either. So without further ado then, let's crack on with this list. So the first game I got for you then is a game called Starace, which was developed by Denton Designs. Now Denton Designs did a lot of games in association with Ocean Software. Classics such as The Great Escape and Frankie Goes to Hollywood. Now the coder behind this game was a guy called Dave Colclough. Stuart Fotheringham done the graphics and Fred Gray done the music, and the music is absolutely fantastic throughout. So obviously Denton Designs approached Ocean Software. They weren't overly keen on publishing this particular game. So the only way you can play it was by buying a copy of Zap 64, and you got it on their cover tape. Now the game itself loads up, it's got a great presentation, it's got a fantastic tune, and the game's a racer which features some vector graphics. But once it starts moving it's quite slow, so the idea is just to go through these vector tunnels and win the race. And that happens over 7 or 8 tunnels, and that's it. That is it for the game. So next up is a game called Batman the Adventure. Now this game was being developed in-house at Ocean Software, graphics being done by Simon Butler and the coding being done by the late Ian Weatherburn. Now those two guys worked on the previous 2 text adventures from Ocean, which was Hunchback the Adventure and The Never-Ending Story. Now as far as I can tell, Hunchback the Adventure didn't sell particularly well, and as a collectible item it's quite hard to get. So yeah, so I'm not quite sure what happened to Batman the Adventure. I can only really surmise that it was either a licensing issue, the game wasn't particularly great, off the back of the previous text adventures. Ocean thought, well, we're not going to release these games. Now the idea behind it was that they would release it in conjunction with Batman 3D. Now Batman 3D was the name previously given to Batman, which came out on all the 8-bit systems, except for the Commodore 64, which was another story completely. There you go. So at number 3 is Street Hawk, which always seems to make these lists. Now it was being done externally by a guy called Gary Knight. Now he overshot the project deadline. Ocean couldn't get the game out to the distributors and therefore couldn't get it into the shops. So they brought the project back in-house. Now it's being coded by a chap called Colin Gresty, graphics done by Steve Wahid, and music by Martin Galway. So the game still never got finished for the Commodore 64. So by 1987 Ocean had enough and scrapped the project, because all the advertising that went out for the game pretty much become null and void. So there are some elements of the game still in existence, such as the source code and the music. Unfortunately, there's none of Steve's graphics, so if you could find his graphics and someone could miraculously put the game together, you may have a almost fully functioning game. Because the game had 8 directional scrolling and had some resemblance, by all accounts, to a very early Grand Theft Auto. So it would be wonderful if you could find the additional graphics. So at number 4 is a game called Castle Capers, which was developed by Andrew Taylor. Now, Andrew Taylor previously worked on a game called Stunt Bike, which was published by Ocean Software. So this game also features in the Commercial Breaks documentary, which was aired in the United Kingdom in 1984. So he took his second game in. Ocean Software unfortunately rejected it on the basis that the graphics were not state of the art for the Commodore 64. Now this game was sat on for a couple of years before being re-released or relaunched back in Germany under the Quellasoft label in conjunction with Ocean Software, funny enough. The game over there was called Das Spuckschlob, not sure if that's how you pronounce it, and re-released over in the United Kingdom again as A Secret of Kandar, so you can play the game under 2 different labels. But yeah, the game itself is a bit of a platformer. From what I've seen, it doesn't look particularly great as I watched a YouTube clip of it. Just go in and out of doors and up and down stairs. Not quite sure what the objective of the game is, to be honest, and probably can see why it got rejected by Ocean Software. So next up is a game based on a television series I used to watch a lot as a kid and thoroughly enjoyed. That was Airwolf. Now, the game was being advertised and developed by Ocean Software at the back end of 1984. But obviously Elite Systems won the license to publish it, so Ocean then dropped the project because there's no point pursuing it. Now, the Spectrum version was being developed by a chap called Dan Hartley, and his game ultimately went out as a game called Super Chopper sometime later, under a budget label From Software Projects. Now, the Commodore 64 version, no one really knows where that went, because Ocean were working on other helicopter style games, namely one being called Cyclone, and obviously Airwolf. But if you play a game in Germany, again by Quellasoft, called Helikopter Jagd, it looks like that was the remnants of Airwolf. You can probably see that from the screenshots. It looks like it's a bloody similar game. So yeah, there's not a lot of information based on Airwolf. That's the only best guess anyone has got. Now that could well be Airwolf.
When you walk through a storm.
So next up for me is probably the most intriguing game in this entire list. And that game is Liverpool FC, a game that was being developed by Wicked for Ocean Software. So the coding was being done by Nick Taylor, graphics by Jason Brashill and music by Matthew Cannon. Now this game was supposed to be a hybrid of management and arcade. It was supposed to be released obviously during 1990. But intriguingly, Liverpool FC was a license that was held by Grand Slam and not by Ocean Software. Apparently one company had the logo, one company had the name. But the ST and Amiga versions of Liverpool FC were quite far behind in development. And Ocean Software obviously wanted to release the game in time for the World Cup. So they scrapped the Liverpool FC project, rebranded the arcade element as Adidas Championship Football. Now because the ST and Amiga versions were quite far behind, it looks like they scrapped that as well, because there were reviews of that, which I've highlighted in the previous unreleased Ocean Games video. So yeah, that was quite intriguing to hear that. But yeah, but you can download the entire management side of it to have a look at, to see what the game would have been like on the Commodore 64. You could download files to see what the sound and music would have been like. You can actually download a still of the arcade element, which was never actually finished under the Liverpool FC development. But I thought it was really strange loading it up and seeing what looked like Adidas Championship Soccer, the actual menu screen, to realise it was called Liverpool FC. So yeah, for me the most enlightening of all the finds I've found in this top 10. And next up at number 7 is a game I thought was released on the 8-bits, or all the 8-bit machines, for quite some time. Then I'm slowly realising that it didn't get a release on the Spectrum, because the Spectrum version only got released in Spain. The Amstrad version you can only seem to buy in France, and the Commodore 64 version you can only get on this compilation, and that game is called Beach Volley. As you can see there, this is the Commodore 64 bundle pack I think you get with the World Cup set, which came out in 1990. And there's Beach Volley. Now the original 16-bit versions were developed by Ocean France, whereas the 8-bit versions were developed by Northern Ireland's very own Choice Software. Now unfortunately the Spectrum version is abysmal. The Commodore 64 version doesn't look fantastic either. So you can probably see why Ocean Software didn't want to publish those full price games in the UK, although it was heavily advertised in magazines for quite some time, probably at least 6 months. I remember seeing it in the magazines I used to buy back in the day. Now it's literally just a beach volley game. I think it's just a 2-on-2 beach volley game. Not really my cup of tea, to be honest, but the 16-bit versions, especially the Amiga version, was an absolute classic. It's a shame it didn't come across onto the 8-bit platform that well. So next up would have been Ocean Software's last release on the Commodore 64 until disaster struck. The game's called Parasol Stars, and the guy working on it was called Colin Porch. So he was responsible for games like Operation Wolf, Head Over Heels and Grisor. So he was at home developing Parasol Stars for the Commodore 64. Took a demo copy in after being working on it for about 3 months trying to get all the routines right. Ocean Software then gave him the green light to go home and develop the rest of the game. Unfortunately, burglars broke in and stole his development discs. So then he had nothing other than the preview copy that he showed Ocean Software before. So apparently he went back to Ocean Software, wanted to continue to make the game. Obviously he made it previously, so he probably would have made it in quicker time. By that point Ocean lost interest in the game, and also lost interest in the Commodore 64. So unfortunately, had a sad end. Now from what I've read, his ex-wife destroyed a lot of his development discs. And he does believe that the demo of Parasol Stars that he created was chucked in a skip. But he's not sure, but he's never gone back to the games that weren't website to clarify that. So hopefully there's some kind of demo still kicking around in Colin's gaff. If not, sad story really. So next up at number 9 is a game that was destined to be released as a cartridge game on the Commodore 64. We saw it on the Spectrum on cassette and we saw it on the Amstrad Plus range on cartridge. It's not a very easy game to get even when it was released. And that game is Plotting, so I'm not quite sure why Ocean Software didn't release this game because it was completed. It was actually a very good conversion of the arcade classic of the same name. It's a very good puzzler for those who haven't played it. Certainly worth giving a go, but you can at least download Plotting on a Commodore 64 emulator and play it. But yeah, the game was subsequently scrapped and the discs put into a disc box labelled as crap and then borrowed for some months later on and then returned. So yeah, not quite sure what happened with this one. There's not really a lot of information to go by. Just be interested to find out why Ocean Software didn't release a game that actually is quite good. So last but not least, by a long chalk, is Double Dragon, a game that was never released in the shops. The only way you could have got it, if you were very fortunate, is to have gone to an Ocean Software stand at a computer show. So yeah, Double Dragon. So Double Dragon, last time I see that sell, it sold for just over £400, and that was about 2 years ago. There's only about 2 or 3 copies known to exist. The game itself was developed or coded by Jamie Irvine, graphics by Peter Goldsmith and Andrew Gilmore, the music by the legendary Barry Leach. But the game itself plays really well, really smooth. Music is fantastic, but I think there's only one player and there's no real end sequence. I think the game may not have been 100% complete before it was sold at these shows. But that's it. That is the biggest game on the list, because you can download it, you can play it to your heart's content, but it's also possible to own it as part of your collection. So thank you very much for watching these videos. Thank you very much for subscribing. I'll see you guys again real soon. Take care and bye for now.